It was a warm Saturday morning in a quiet neighborhood park in Cresthill, a peaceful suburb where trees stood tall, kids rode bikes, and families strolled with coffee in hand. The sun was out, the breeze gentle, and laughter echoed from the swing sets. It seemed like a perfect day. 12-year-old Elijah Carter was riding his skateboard near the basketball courts. Dressed in a red hoodie and jeans, his face lit up with joy every time he landed a trick. Elijah wasn't just playing, he was practicing. He dreamed of becoming a professional skateboarder. His mom had promised him that if he saved up and stayed out of trouble, she'd take him to a real skate competition in Atlanta next summer. Elijah was focused, respectful, and careful not to disturb anyone. He always greeted people with a smile. The janitor knew him by name. The ice cream man gave him extra sprinkles, but that didn't stop trouble from finding him. On the other side of the park sat a white woman named Linda Matthews. She was in her early 50s, wearing designer sunglasses, and walking her small Pomeranian named Daisy. Linda lived just 3 blocks away in one of the high-end gated communities. She prided herself on being watchful and community-aware, which in her mind meant reporting anything or anyone she thought was out of place. Linda had seen Elijah skating a few times before, but today she was feeling particularly uneasy. "Why is he here alone?" she muttered, narrowing her eyes. "What's he really doing? Is he casing the park?" She clutched her phone and whispered to Daisy, "We'll just make sure everything's okay." Then she dialed 911. "There's a suspicious individual," she told the dispatcher. "A young black male, hoodie, skating around the park. I think he might be planning something. He's been circling for a while. Could be dangerous." The dispatcher asked her if the boy had said or done anything threatening. "No," she admitted, "but he keeps looking around. I don't feel safe. Please send someone fast." Just minutes later, a patrol car rolled into the park. Elijah saw the flashing lights and instinctively slowed his skateboard, confusion on his face. He didn't think anything was wrong. Maybe someone had fallen. Maybe the police were just checking in. But then the officer walked straight toward him. "Hey kid," the officer called. "Can I talk to you for a second?" Elijah stopped and stepped off his board, trying to stay calm. "Yes, sir." The officer glanced at his notepad. "We got a call about a suspicious person matching your description. You live around here?" Elijah nodded. "Yes, sir. I live just 2 blocks that way." "Are you alone?" "Yes, sir. My mom's working this morning. She let me come practice. I've been coming here since I was 6. The officer looked unsure. Elijah was polite, respectful, but the report still lingered in his mind. Meanwhile, Linda had walked over, still holding Daisy. "Thank you for coming, officer," she said loudly. "I didn't feel safe with him circling the area like that. He looked like he might have a weapon or something." I don't have anything," Elijah said quietly. "Just my board." The officer asked Elijah to sit down on a nearby bench while he checked the situation further. Elijah sat, nervous now. He had never been in trouble before. His heart was racing. Kids and parents were watching. He could feel their eyes, some curious, some judgmental. But what nobody expected was what happened next. A sleek black SUV pulled into the parking lot. The doors opened quickly, and a tall, confident woman stepped out in a navy blue pantsuit and heels. Her hair was styled with precision, and a small American flag pin sparkled on her collar. It was Governor Michelle Carter, Elijah's mother. She didn't run. She walked with purpose, her presence commanding respect without her saying a single word. "Excuse me," she said, approaching the officer. "What exactly is going on here?" The officer turned, slightly startled. "Ma'am, we got a call about a suspicious." "That's my son," she said firmly, pointing to Elijah. "His name is Elijah Carter. He's 12. He's practicing skateboarding. He's done absolutely nothing wrong." Linda's face paled. She turned toward the governor. "You're his mother?" she asked, suddenly unsure. "Yes, I am." "And who are you to be calling the police on a child doing nothing but skateboarding in a public park?" "I didn't know," Linda stammered. He looked suspicious." "You mean he looked black?" Governor Carter replied, calm but cutting. "Let me guess. You felt unsafe." The officer looked down, clearly uncomfortable. "Governor Carter, I assure you we were only responding to the call." "And I assure you," she said, her voice rising just slightly, "that my son will not be treated like a criminal for simply being a child in his own neighborhood." Elijah stood up, slowly walking over to his mother. She placed a protective arm around him, her eyes never leaving the officers. "I'll be filing a formal complaint," she said, And I expect this to be the last time my son is approached like this unless he's in danger or breaking the law, which he wasn't. The officer nodded respectfully. Understood, ma'am. As they walked back to their car, Elijah whispered, Thanks, Mom. She smiled and kissed the top of his head. You did nothing wrong. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Linda stood frozen, speechless, as the SUV pulled away, leaving her to reflect on what she'd just done. By the next morning, Elijah's story had spread like wildfire. Someone in the park had recorded everything, the police questioning, the woman's accusation, and the moment Governor Michelle Carter showed up and took control with grace and fire in her voice. The video, titled Governor Defends Her Son from Racial Profiling, had already reached over 2 million views online. News anchors discussed it on national television. Social media exploded with support. Hashtags like #ProtectBlackChildren, #ElijahCarter, and #GovernorMom started trending across platforms. But none of that noise reached Elijah right away. He sat at the kitchen table that Sunday morning, his cereal going soggy in front of him. His skateboard leaned silently in the corner. Normally, he'd be itching to get outside again, to practice that kickflip he almost landed yesterday. But today, his spirit felt heavy. Michelle Carter, despite her busy schedule as state governor, had taken the entire day off. She sat across from Elijah, still in her row, no makeup, no Christine, just a mother sitting with her son. You okay, baby? She asked gently. Elijah nodded but didn't speak. Michelle leaned closer. You're allowed to talk about how it made you feel. I want you to. Elijah finally looked up. Why did she call the police on me? I wasn't doing anything wrong. Michelle sighed deeply, because sometimes people see what they want to see. They let fear and prejudice control their judgment. That doesn't make it right, Elijah. It makes it wrong. And we will keep fighting it. But why me? He asked again. Why always us? That question broke her. Michelle reached across the table and held his hand. I ask myself the same question every day, sweetheart. I'd spent my whole career trying to build a better world where you don't have to ask that. But I won't lie to you. There are still people out there who look at your skin and see a threat before they see your heart. Elijah stared at the table for a moment. Then, in a whisper, he asked, Would it have ended the same if you weren't you? Michelle's heart cracked at the edges. No, she admitted. If I wasn't your mother, a governor, if I didn't walk in when I did, they might have taken you to the station, or worse. That's why I'm here. That's why I do what I do. There was a long silence. Outside, birds chirped. Inside, a boy just 12 years old carried a weight he didn't deserve. Michelle stood and walked to the window. Her phone buzzed again and again. Messages from reporters, civil rights leaders, even the president's office. But she didn't answer any of them yet. Instead, she turned to Elijah. You want to help me with something important? He looked up, curious. I've been asked to speak tonight. I want you to come. And I want them to see you, not just as the boy from the video, but as a full person. Smart, kind, brave. Do you think you can do that? Elijah swallowed hard and nodded. Okay. That evening, the town of Cresthill was flooded with cameras and community members. The city hall had never seen such a crowd. Some held signs, some held candles. Many came simply to listen. When Governor Michelle Carter stepped onto the podium, a hush fell across the crowd. She wore a deep blue blazer, simple earrings, and a calm yet commanding presence. But it was her voice, strong, grounded, and full of truth, that silenced the noise of the world. Yesterday, a boy was labeled suspicious for doing what millions of other children do. Every day, playing in a park. That boy is my son. His name is Elijah Carter. A round of applause rippled across the audience. But this isn't just about Elijah. This is about every child who's ever been followed in a store, questioned for walking home, or treated like a criminal because of the color of their skin. She paused, looking down for a moment. This is about what kind of world we are shaping for our children, what kind of future we are promising them, and what we, as leaders and neighbors, are willing to do to change things. Then she motioned to the side of the stage, and Elijah walked up slowly, standing beside her. He looked nervous, hands in his pockets, but he stood tall. I didn't come here to talk about hate, Michelle continued. I came here to talk about responsibility. We all have it, parents, policymakers, police, and yes, citizens who make that call, especially them. At that, a few people glanced toward the back where Linda Matthews, the woman from the park, sat quietly. She had come, uninvited, but feeling the heat of the story's impact. Her face showed deep discomfort, not from public shame, but from a slow, painful realization of her mistake. Michelle's tone never turned angry, never pointed. She remained firm, but graceful. "We are not here to cancel people," she said. "We are here to call them in, to a higher standard, to better understanding, to greater compassion. That's the only way forward." When she finished, the crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled. But for Michelle and Elijah, it was more than a speech. It was a stand, a mark in history. A line drawn not in anger, but in courage. As they stepped down from the stage, Michelle whispered to her son, "You did good." He smiled faintly, finally starting to believe it. The morning after the town hall speech, Elijah didn't expect much to change. Sure, people had clapped. They said kind things. But in his mind, people clapped one day and forgot the next. He was back at school now, head down, trying to focus on his math quiz when the classroom door creaked open. His teacher, Ms. Harmon, paused her lesson and looked up. "Yes?" The school counselor, Mr. Bledsoe, stepped in. "Elijah Carter, the principal would like to see you." Elijah's stomach turned. He looked around. Some kids raised their eyebrows. Others just stared. This wasn't new, being singled out like this. But today, after everything, it felt heavier. He walked through the hallway quietly. The walls had posters about kindness, about dreams, about respecting one another. Elijah had read them 100 times. But sometimes, words on a wall didn't feel like reality. Principal Wilkins was waiting by the office. A tall man with silver hair and glasses. He always seemed serious but fair. Today, though, he had a different expression. Thoughtful. Maybe even nervous. "Elijah," he said gently. "There's someone here who would like to speak with you. You don't have to say anything." But she asked, and we thought we'd leave that choice to you. Inside the office sat Linda Matthews, the same woman who called the police on him just days ago. She looked different. Not in clothes, still neat and polished, but in posture. Her shoulders were slouched, her eyes softer, and her face carried something he hadn't seen before. Humility. "Elijah," she said, standing slowly. "You probably don't want to see me, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But I wanted to say something, not because someone told me to, but because I need to." Elijah didn't speak. He stood there, arms folded, trying to stay composed. Linda took a breath. "I judged you, not by your actions, but by my assumptions. I saw your skin color and your hoodie before I saw your humanity. That was wrong. That was unfair. That was racist." Her voice trembled slightly. "I didn't realize it at first. I thought I was doing the right thing, but the more I watched that video, the more I listened to your mother's speech, the more I saw the truth." Elijah tilted his head. "What truth?" Linda looked straight at him. "That was the problem, not you, and that I need to be better. Learn more. Unlearn a lot." There was a long pause, the kind that makes your heart beat loud in your ears. "I'm sorry," she said, placing a handwritten envelope on the table beside her. "This is for you. You don't have to open it now." Then she stood. "That's all I came to say. Thank you for listening, even if you didn't want to." She turned and left. Principal Wilkins looked at Elijah. "You okay?" Elijah nodded, unsure of what he felt. A little bit of everything. Confusion, power, sadness, maybe even a touch of hope. He picked up the envelope and sat on a nearby chair. Inside was a letter written in careful script. "Dear Elijah, I will never be able to undo what I did, but I promise to start doing better. Today I signed up for anti-bias training, and I joined a local community initiative led by parents of color. I will spend the rest of my life making sure that what I did to you never happens to another child again. I hope one day you'll see me not for what I did wrong, but for how I changed after." With regret and hope, Linda Matthews. Later that evening, Elijah sat on the front porch with his mom. She was reviewing a folder of documents for her next campaign initiative. But she put them down when she saw the look on his face. "You okay?" she asked again. He nodded. "That woman from the park came to my school today." Michelle straightened. "What did she say?" "She apologized. For real." Michelle raised an eyebrow. "Did you believe her?" "I think so," he said. "She gave me a letter. Said she's joining groups and learning about her bias." Michelle let out a long breath. "That's rare, baby. Not everyone who makes a mistake is brave enough to admit it, let alone try to fix it. I didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything." Michelle smiled gently. "Sometimes silence is enough, especially when you're listening with your heart." They sat there together, the orange glow of sunset painting the sky. a mother and her son, a boy who'd been wronged, a woman who stood for him, and a community that had begun to change. Elsewhere in town, the ripples were growing. The school board began holding equity meetings. The local police department announced new youth engagement programs. A group of teenagers created a club called Voices of Change and asked Elijah to be their first guest speaker. He was hesitant at first. "I'm not a speaker," he told them. "I just skate." But one of the girls replied, "You stood up just by existing. That's powerful enough." And for the first time, Elijah began to believe that maybe, just maybe, this moment wasn't the end of something painful, but the start of something powerful. 2 weeks had passed since the park incident. For Elijah Carter, life was slowly returning to something close to normal. He still skated in the mornings. He still sat in the back row of math class. But something inside him had changed, and the people around him felt it too. There was a calm confidence in his steps now. Not loud, not showy, but steady. The same could not be said about Cresthill Middle School. The administration, under pressure from the community and the governor's quiet but firm push, had decided to hold a school-wide assembly. The topic, racial bias and the importance of treating every student with dignity. It would be the first of its kind. And to the surprise of many, the keynote speaker was not an outside expert. It was Elijah. "Me?" he had said when Principal Wilkins asked. "You?" the principal confirmed. "You don't have to give a speech. Just talk. Say what you felt, what you still feel. You've lived something we can all learn from." At first, Elijah wanted to say no. Speaking in front of hundreds of students, teachers, even Linda Matthews had been invited. It felt like too much. But later that night, he remembered his mom's words. "Sometimes your silence speaks volumes, but other times your voice becomes the change." So he said yes. The gym was packed. Students sat in neat rows, some whispering, some watching curiously. Teachers stood along the walls. Cameras from local news outlets were discreetly stationed at the back. On the stage stood a single microphone. Behind it, a banner read, "One school, many stories, one future." Principal Wilkins opened the event. "Today isn't about pointing fingers. It's about opening hearts. It's about listening. We have a brave young man who's agreed to share his experience with us. Please welcome Elijah Carter." The gym erupted into polite applause. Elijah walked slowly to the microphone, wearing a clean hoodie, dark jeans, and a look of quiet determination. He took a breath and looked out at the crowd. "My name is Elijah. I'm 12 years old. I like skateboarding. I like drawing comics. And I'm the kid you saw in that video." A few people nodded. Some looked away, uncomfortable. "When I went to the park that day, didn't know someone would call the police on me. I didn't know just being a kid could be seen as dangerous, but it happened." He paused, the microphone picking up the emotion in his breath. "I didn't do anything wrong, but I felt like a criminal. I felt small, like I didn't belong." Silence blanketed the room. Then my mom came. You all know she's the governor. Before that, she's my protector. She stood up for me. And now I'm trying to stand up for other kids like me. He looked toward the back where Linda Matthews stood, clutching a small notebook. "I want to tell you something important," Elijah continued. "Not every mistake comes from hate. Sometimes it comes from fear. But fear can be unlearned. If you let yourself listen, if you let yourself care." He gripped the podium a little tighter. "We all have bias. Every one of us. It doesn't mean you're a bad person, but it means you've got work to do." Then he looked around the room. Some of you laughed when it happened. Some of you stayed quiet. And some of you checked on me later. I remember all of it. "But I'm not mad," he said, "because I don't want revenge. I want change." He stepped back from the mic, nodded once, and returned to his seat. The gym sat still. Then slowly, like a ripple, hands began clapping. First from the front row. Then from the sides. Then from everyone. It wasn't loud. It wasn't forced. It was real. After the assembly, dozens of students came up to him, kids he barely knew. A boy from 7th grade said, "My older brother went through something like that. I'm glad you spoke up." A girl from science class said, "You were so brave. I cried when I saw the video." Even Ms. Peterson, the strict math teacher, placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You have more courage than most adults I know." But the moment that truly surprised him came when Linda Matthews approached once more. She held out a small envelope. "This is from the Neighborhood Association," she said. "We're starting a youth-led project to improve relationships between neighbors and teens. We want you to be on the committee." Elijah blinked. Me? You, she said, echoing Principal Wilkins' words. You're already a leader, Elijah. Now we want to learn from you. That night at home, Elijah shared everything with his mom. She listened, her face full of pride. You're becoming your own kind of governor, she said with a smile. Elijah laughed. Nah, that's your thing. But something in his heart shifted. Maybe leadership didn't always come with a title or a podium. Maybe it came with courage, truth, and the willingness to show up when it was hardest. Across Cresthill, the story was evolving. The local police department reached out to Governor Carter for a partnership to start a youth safety council. The school district introduced new training for all staff focused on recognizing unconscious bias. A new mural was painted at the community center, one that showed children of every race, holding hands, skating, laughing, and living freely. At the center was a small boy on a skateboard, smiling, hoodie flapping in the wind. His name, Elijah. The world didn't go quiet after the school assembly. In fact, it only grew louder. But this time, in the right direction. Elijah's story had reached the desks of national journalists, the emails of school board leaders across states, and the hearts of everyday people who were just beginning to understand the subtle dangers of bias. What had started as a quiet skate session turned into a movement of reflection, education, and action. But for Elijah, the fame didn't change who he was. He still made time to do his homework. He still helped his neighbor, Mr. Leroy, carry groceries from the car, and he still practiced tricks in the park. Now joined by a growing group of kids who suddenly saw him as more than just a boy on a board, they saw him as someone who made a difference. One Friday afternoon, as the golden light poured through the windows of the Carter home, Michelle Carter sat at the dining table, scanning through her schedule. She had speaking invitations from colleges, town halls, and even a televised roundtable with other governors. Yet her eyes kept drifting to one email in particular, a formal invitation from the National Youth Justice Summit in Washington, D.C. It wasn't addressed to her. It was for Elijah. She smiled, then turned her laptop so he could see it. Elijah, who had just come in from skating and was gulping down a bottle of water, squinted at the screen. They want me to speak? He asked, surprised. Yes, Michelle nodded. In front of a room full of activists, senators, teachers, and students from across the country. They want your voice. Elijah sat down slowly, the bottle still in his hand. But why me? Because your story changed lives. Because your truth reached beyond the city. Because you represent so many others who never had the chance to speak. And now you do. Elijah didn't respond right away. He stared at the screen. There were dates, accommodations, a full itinerary. They're offering to fly us out, Michelle added. I'll go with you, of course. He finally smiled, nervous but excited. Okay, let's go. 2 weeks later, Elijah stood backstage in a grand hall in Washington, D.C. Velvet curtains, tall pillars, the air thick with nerves and importance. Michelle stood beside him, hand on his shoulder. Just be you, she said. Speak from your heart. He nodded, then walked toward the stage when his name was called. The room felt quiet. Elijah took his place at the podium, looked around at the sea of faces, brown, white, young, old, all watching, all waiting. He cleared his throat. I'm not here to impress you, he began. I'm here to remind you. You could hear a pin drop. I want to remind you that kids like me, black kids, brown kids, kids in hoodies, kids on skateboards, we deserve to be safe. We deserve to be seen as more than just a threat. He paused, hands steady now. Someone called the police on me for doing what kids do, but what shocked me most wasn't that it happened. It's that everyone acted like it was normal. Until my mom showed up and reminded them who we are. Soft murmurs of agreement rose from the audience, but not every kid has a governor for a mom. Not every kid gets saved in time. That's why I'm standing here now, so we don't wait until something worse happens. Then his voice lowered, becoming more intimate. I forgave the woman who called the police on me, because forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means freeing yourself from the weight. But I also asked her to do better, because apologies without action are just noise. The audience erupted into applause. Elijah finished with a quiet but powerful message. I'm 12. I shouldn't have to teach grown-ups how to treat me. But I will if I have to. Until we build a world where kids can skate in the park without fear, and parents don't have to worry when their child leaves home. He stepped back, and the standing ovation that followed felt like a wave. Warm, strong, and long overdue. Backstage, Michelle pulled him into a hug. You were amazing. I'd almost cried, Elijah admitted. Good, she said with a laugh. That means it mattered. Moments later, they were surrounded by attendees wanting to thank him, reporters hoping for a quote, and students asking for selfies. Among them was a high school senior named Darian. He was tall, quiet, and wore thick glasses. "You changed the way I see myself," Darian said, voice cracking. "I used to think staying invisible was the only way to stay safe. But now, maybe I want to be seen too." Elijah reached out and shook his hand. "Then speak. The world needs your voice." Back in Cresthill, change continued blooming like spring flowers after a long winter. The neighborhood association created an inclusive mentorship program. The police department hired a youth advocate to build trust between officers and the community. Linda Matthews. She became an advocate for reform, still learning, still listening, and now using her position to fund local awareness workshops. She never asked Elijah for a second chance. Instead, she earned it through quiet, consistent action. One morning, Elijah returned to the park where it all started. He sat on the same bench where he had waited for the police that day. Only this time, he wasn't afraid. He watched other kids laugh, play, run, fall, get back up. And he smiled, because for once, the world didn't feel like it was watching him with suspicion. It felt like it was listening. Months passed. The leaves in Cresthill turned golden, then brown. School resumed after the summer break, and with it came new books, new students, and a new world that Elijah Carter had helped shape. The town hadn't gone back to normal. It had evolved. Elijah, now 13, was no longer just the kid from the park video. He had become a local figure, known across the state as a voice of change. Not for loud protests or viral speeches, but for his quiet courage, his honesty, and his commitment to showing up even when it was uncomfortable. But with his growing reputation came a new challenge. He had been invited to sit as the youngest ever member of a state youth advisory council, a panel organized by Governor Michelle Carter's office to propose new laws and reforms aimed at protecting children from racial profiling and unjust policing. The room where they met wasn't glamorous. It was a simple conference room inside the state capitol with long tables, microphones, and notepads. Around him sat high schoolers, college students, activists, and educators, all older, all more experienced. Still, when Elijah walked in, the room felt respectfully silent. He took his seat, notebook in hand. His fingers fidgeted at first, unsure of what to say. But when it came time to speak, his voice was clear. "I'm not a politician," Elijah began. "I'm not even in high school, but I know what it's like to be treated like a problem just for existing." He looked around the room, making eye contact with those who leaned in to listen. Sometimes it starts small. A glance, a whisper, a woman calling the police on a kid with a skateboard. And sometimes that's all it takes to ruin a life. He paused. "I was lucky. My mom showed up. But not every child gets saved. That's why we can't just talk about change. We have to write it, pass it, enforce it." The room nodded. The energy shifted. That day, Elijah proposed something simple but revolutionary, a Youth Safety and Equity Act, a bill that would require mandatory anti-bias training for all school staff and law enforcement, interacting with youth community liaisons in every district to review public complaints and help mediate early conflicts, youth safety resource officers trained in de-escalation and child psychology to replace aggressive patrols in parks and schools, anonymous reporting apps for kids to safely report racial profiling or harassment, public education campaigns created by students about how assumptions can harm lives. The proposals weren't radical. They were reasonable, thoughtful, grounded in lived experience. And they got attention. The panel voted unanimously to push the Youth Safety and Equity Act to the governor's legislative team. Governor Carter, his mother, was proud, of course, but she was also careful. "This isn't about me," she told Elijah as they walked the halls of the Capitol afterward. "People will try to say this bill passed because of who your mother is." Elijah nodded. "I know, but we'll show them it passed because it was right." She smiled. "Exactly." Back home in Cresthill, life went on. The fall festival brought caramel apples and live music. Local artists painted murals with kids from the Voices of Change Club. And one Sunday, the town unveiled a bronze plaque at the park entrance. It read, "Dedicated to every child told they don't belong, and to those who dared to stay anyway." Inspired by Elijah Carter, 2025 Linda Matthews was there too. She didn't make speeches. She didn't seek credit. But she stood beside Elijah as they unveiled the plaque. She had worked quietly behind the scenes, organizing community roundtables, helping fund a youth scholarship, and supporting families impacted by similar incidents. I never told you this, she whispered to Elijah that day, but I grew up in a different time, and I never questioned what I was taught. Until you. Elijah looked at her, no anger in his eyes, just reflection. We all grew up learning things we didn't ask for. He said, the real question is whether we choose to outgrow them. By winter, the Youth Safety and Equity Act had passed through committee and was up for state vote. Elijah was invited to testify one final time, this time in front of lawmakers, some skeptical, some supportive, and many unfamiliar with what it meant to be feared as a child. As he stood before them, in a suit and tie his mom had helped him pick out, he said, I'm not asking you to change the world overnight. I'm asking you to stop pretending it's okay to treat some children as threats before they ever speak a word. I'm asking you to give them a fair chance to grow up. The vote passed. Not by a landslide, but by enough. Elijah didn't jump for joy. He didn't cry. He simply sat beside his mother in the gallery, watching history unfold, a quiet smile on his face. That night, Michelle cooked Elijah's favorite dinner, grilled chicken, mashed potatoes, and cornbread. Just the two of them, away from cameras, away from press releases. You proud of yourself? She asked. Elijah shrugged. Yeah, but I'm just getting started. She laughed. Oh, already planning your next law? No, he said, leaning back in his chair. But maybe a book, for kids like me, to tell them they matter, that their story can change something. Michelle nodded slowly, her eyes soft with emotion. Well, she said, you've already proven one thing. What's that? That one quiet boy on a skateboard can make the whole world listen. The sun rose quietly over Cresthill, casting soft golden rays across the freshly cleaned streets. It was a peaceful Saturday, one of those mornings where the air feels gentler, like the world is holding its breath before something important. Elijah Carter stood in front of his mirror, carefully buttoning a white-collared shirt. It was crisp, freshly ironed by his mom the night before. On his chest sat a small pin, a silver skateboard beneath the words, "Let them be kids." Today wasn't just any day. It was the day Elijah would stand before an international audience at the Global Summit on Youth Justice and Human Rights. For the first time in history, a teenager, not a politician, not a lawyer, would open the summit with a keynote. He was 13. In the living room, Governor Michelle Carter was already dressed in a sleek blue suit, but today she didn't wear her governor badge. Today she was just a mother being with pride. You ready? She asked as he stepped out. Elijah nodded, holding his speech notes in one hand. As I'll ever be. They walked out together, met by a waiting car. Outside, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, not for photos or clout, but just to see him off. Mr. Leroy waved. Ms. Harmon from school held a handmade sign, "Go Elijah," and standing quietly in the back was Linda Matthews, her eyes glassy, her hands folded. She gave him a small nod. He returned it with a respectful smile. This wasn't about old wounds. This was about healing. In Washington, D.C., the conference hall buzzed with excitement. Representatives from over 40 countries sat in rows. Activists, artists, educators, and youth leaders had flown in from around the globe. Behind the podium was a massive screen that simply read, "Every child deserves to be seen." When Elijah stepped onto the stage, he didn't stumble. He didn't hesitate. He stood tall, not as a victim, not as a symbol, but as a young leader carrying the stories of millions like him. He began, 2 years ago, I was just a kid skating in a park. Someone looked at me and saw danger, but I wasn't the problem. The real problem was the story they told themselves about who I was and who I wasn't. That story almost got me arrested. It could have cost me my life. But something unexpected happened. My mom showed up. The world saw what many kids go through every day. And suddenly, people started listening. He walked slowly across the stage, making eye contact with the audience. Since then, I've spoken in schools, written policy, and worked with people who are trying to fix what's broken. But I'm not here today to talk about what I've done. I'm here to ask, what will you do? He paused. Will you teach your children not just to be kind, but to be fair? Will you speak up when you see someone being treated like they don't belong? Will you admit that we all have work to do, especially those who've never been questioned for simply being? Silence, but not the empty kind. It was the kind of silence that happens when truth sinks deep. I believe in a world where a kid can wear a hoodie and still be seen as human. I believe in a future where no mother has to defend her child for existing. And I believe that change doesn't start in courtrooms. It starts in parks, In classrooms, on sidewalks. It starts with us. He closed his speech with a line that had echoed in his mind since the beginning. You don't have to be powerful to change the world. You just have to care enough to stop pretending it's not your problem. The applause rose slowly, then erupted. Tears, claps, cheers. Even some lawmakers stood, hands to their chests. Elijah stepped down quietly, returning to his seat next to his mother, who wrapped an arm around him without saying a word, because no words were needed. A week later, something happened that Elijah would never forget. A box arrived at his doorstep, no return address. Inside was a single item, a small handcrafted wooden skateboard with his initials carved into it. Attached was a handwritten note, for the boy who reminded the world that wheels don't just carry children, they carry hope. An old man who once stayed silent too long. It was anonymous, but Elijah understood. People were changing, not just in public, but in private. 1 year later, a national curriculum on anti-bias training was named after Elijah Carter. It was distributed across all 50 states. Thousands of schools now use his story to teach awareness, fairness, and empathy. The Youth Safety and Equity Act expanded into federal policy. Crest Hill City Park was renamed Elijah Carter Freedom Park, and a bronze statue of a boy on a skateboard now stands by the gate, symbolizing every child who was ever told they didn't belong and chose to stay anyway. On a quiet morning, Elijah sat at the edge of the park, sketching in his notebook. Not for a speech, not for a campaign, just for himself. A little girl rode her bike nearby, then stopped when she recognized him. You're the boy who changed the rules, right? She asked, eyes wide. Elijah smiled. I just asked people to remember we were human. That was enough. She grinned and pedaled off, waving. Thanks. As the wind ruffled the pages of his notebook, Elijah looked around, the trees swaying, laughter in the air, kids running, jumping, skating, no fear, no judgment, just childhood. And somewhere deep inside him, he knew the world had listened. And this time, it didn't forget.